There was a second Manhattan Project by Alec 2004. There was more than one Manhattan Project. If you recall your latest history class, you might remember your teacher droning on about the Manhattan Project, the code name for the development of nuclear weapons by the good old USA during the Second World War. Well, what you don't know is that buried under a few files in some black suit wearing Pentagon worker's desk is the record for the Second Manhattan Project. The Second Manhattan Project was a small sideshow in comparison to the building of the two nukes that we dropped in Japan back in '45. In fact, the whole thing received little funding from Congress and was led by two Harvard nerds with thick-rimmed glasses and boring personalities. But they got the job done. They don't know they did, but they did. What was the job? To hop sideways. It's hard to comprehend, but think of it as an elevator. Our dimension, our world, everything in our universe that we have and will hear and will see and will smell and experience is in this elevator. The elevator has no doors. Everything is walled in without the chance of escape. But, like all elevators, there's a top floor when the elevator must stop. Except, on each of these elevators, there are no brakes. And due to the speed of this metaphorical elevator, it will crash into the ceiling with a force of 1,000 suns and destroy all that's inside. But, what if we could go sideways? What if we could somehow open a door into the next elevator and hop in? Obviously, there'd be no major change between each dimension, as they're so close. The change between dimensions could be as small as a blade of grass being chopped a little shorter, or maybe a tree that didn't grow on some alien planet light years away. But, if we could, swapping one dimension for another would be an easy cop-out if things started to head south back home. So, that was my job. To be the human guinea pig of two scientists who tried to work out how they could transport me through time and space. It took months, but eventually they got it. I don't know how, but they did. They ripped a hole in the wall of our elevator and booted me through. Thing is, they kicked me a little too hard. And on such a large scale, this tiny little kick to get me from dimension A to B would create a bit of momentum. Therefore, I've seen everything. Everything from now, right up until the end. Dear viewer, I've seen your death. I've seen your children's death. And I've seen their children's death. And let me tell you one thing. It's a lot closer than you would think. The first time I shifted, I guess you could say I woke up in the same room I came from. I had traveled more of a distance than anyone and anything had ever traveled before me. And yet I stayed in the same place. It's funny like that. But there I was all those years ago, waking up on the floor. It had seemed like a knockout punch to the head. I woke with a splitting headache. The two scientists looked at me wide-eyed, with grinning expressions on their faces. Dr. Carmichael and, well, I can't remember the name of the other one. Carmichael asked me what I saw, and I said, nothing. In my mind, I hadn't seen anything. Nothing had happened. How would I have known? I just woke up in the same place. How was I supposed to expect I had traveled between dimensions? So, I said nothing. And after further examinations, I caught the subway home, back to my apartment, and life went on. Shortly after, we won the war and all interest in the Second Manhattan Project was dropped. So I returned to my 9-to-5 office job at an accounting firm in my hometown of Boston. I had a wife, got a promotion, and fathered 2 kids. I noticed nothing initially, but after a while it began to dawn on me. I didn't grow old. I was still looking like the dapper 28-year-old I was back in '45 when my wife died of pancreatic cancer in 1988. and the same when my two sons died of old age in the 2040s. It was around that point I killed myself. Or at least I should have killed myself, but it didn't work. You see, back then I was religious, the type of guy who would attend church every Sunday and say grace before dinner. So when my family began to die off, all I wanted to do was be with them up in heaven. So I tried it all. Overdosing, jumping off buildings, drowning, even a Kurt Cobain-style dinner of a double barrel between the teeth. That one hurt. But nothing worked. All that happened was an unfathomable pain and the uncomfortable sensation of briefly choking on shotgun rounds and the latter passing of them. I was depressed for a long time. Obviously, no one even remembered me. All my buddies from back in the day were dead. And when you're supposed to be two, it's hard to make more. But I persevered. And ended up with another wife and kids. Obviously, by now I knew what had happened. All those years ago, I had just assumed I'd keep on living forever. And I did, kind of. I kept on living in this elevator, in this dimension, until it reached the top of the building. I remember what happened, and I hate to recall it. I was still with my second wife, so not too long in the distant future when the Earth opened up. Cracks spread and pieces of our once beloved planet began to fall off and drift into space. The sun imploded, and our galaxy began to shrink and eventually formed into the biggest black hole, swallowing everything until it just stopped. Till there was nothing. Till I was nothing. And then I opened my eyes and stood up from the floor of the brightly lit room in 1945 and did the same thing over again. Of course, I was better the second time around. I remembered some lotto numbers and made myself a fortune from investing in companies like Apple and Microsoft, along with Quagonomics, and a few other companies that will pop up for you guys in 20 to 30 years. Yet, it ended the same, in a ball of black, growing bigger and bigger until I woke up again, and again, and again, until I eventually woke up without the whole charade. The next few times I woke up after less and less time, until I started to wake up only a few years from now. It was then I started writing this. This exact document has been written on countless Earths, sometimes receiving worldwide attention, sometimes being read by only a select few. However, if you are reading this, I just want you to know that you need to appreciate the time you've got, because very soon it will all be gone. It's what I'm trying to do, at least, because one day I'll have to wake up before that fateful day when I started to sidestep, and who knows what will happen then.